Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, November the 24th, 2025. And it is the last week of November. And in this video, I'm going to start off by just doing a preview of the main astrological events taking place, over the course of a week. And, I will be brief. I'll be going into the various astrological events in much greater detail in my daily horoscopes that take place over the course of the week ahead. And having done this preview, I will do an I Ching reading for this week, and the week will be divided up into 4 sections. For folky, we've got a general view, then money, then career, and finally relationships. So let's start off with the astrology. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe, if appropriate. So here are the start positions of the planets. This is set for noon New York time on Monday, November the 24th. So the sun is in Sagittarius at the beginning of the week, and Mercury is still going retrograde. Mercury's been retrograde for some time, and Mercury is now starting to slow down. Mercury can't be retrograde forever, and you can see what Mercury is doing. There is Mercury at 23:35 Scorpio at the beginning of the week, getting quite close to Venus. And on Tuesday the 25th, there is a conjunction between Venus and Mercury. And this conjunction in Scorpio, I think it's pretty positive. When you've got a Mercury-Venus conjunction, that can certainly emphasize creativity and doing something clever, and perhaps explaining what we're up to. So if we're working on something, maybe we need to start to talk about it. It might not always be easy, because you have got Mercury and Venus both in Scorpio. So, okay, we might not want to tell the whole world about what we're doing, but I think it might be a time to reveal to certain people, what we're up to. And, in a general sense, with Mercury-Venus conjunction, with this Mercury-Venus conjunction, many of us can be very creative. We can do things, of a high quality, and, we can really bring down, the energy, of the universe. And then on Wednesday, the 26th, we have got Venus in Scorpio trine Jupiter in Cancer. So, just as we thought we've got rid of one grand trine, can we get another one? So it's yet another grand trine in water signs. And, the reason, we've got this grand trine continually coming up is because Jupiter and Saturn are so close to the trine. So you've got Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Pisces, and so whenever a planet hits around 25 Scorpio, the grand trine is formed. And so we do have Venus trine Jupiter, Venus trine Saturn. So we have got Venus trine Saturn. So there is Jupiter. So Venus makes a trine to Jupiter, then it moves on to the trine to Saturn. So with Venus making those 2 trines, it really is about things moving. There is a lot of emotion flying around, but I don't think it's sort of ill-disciplined emotion. I think that there is structure there, and we can really sort of get things together. And if we look at Venus and Jupiter in isolation, you could say that Venus and Jupiter in trine aspect, is very fortunate. Venus and Jupiter are the 2 benefics. They represent good luck. And so when you've got a trine between Venus and Jupiter, you could say that, things really are moving. Now, just hoping that we get lucky, being complacent. That's not how we should respond to Venus trine Jupiter. And the fact that Saturn is hitting both of them, both Venus and Jupiter are making the application to Saturn, it does mean that there is a high degree of discipline, and that may be the real way of being successful. Then Thursday the 27th, we've got Mars semi-square Pluto, 45-degree aspect between Mars and Pluto. So Mars Pluto semi-square, it is about power, it's about control, it's about wanting to assert ourselves in a very definite way, and that's certainly an aspect I will be talking about later on in the week. Then Friday and Saturday we have got two planets going stationary direct. So Saturn has been retrograde for some time, and on Friday the 28th it comes to a standstill. Saturn goes stationary direct at 25 degrees 9 Pisces. That's as far back as it goes. And now, over the next few months, Saturn will gather speed, it will go forward, and it will eventually go back into Aries. I think it goes back into Aries on Valentine's Day next year. So that movement has started. Then on the 29th, we've got Mercury going stationary direct at 2043 Scorpio. So the Mercury retrograde drama is finishing. And maybe it's a time when we can sort of put things, back on the rails. And so, if something has been a bit confusing over the last few weeks, we felt we've sort of lost the plot to some extent, then there'll be perhaps a sort of a new focus. And then, right at the end of the week on Sunday, we've got Venus trine Neptune and Venus in Sagittarius. So the Venus in Sagittarius, it's kind of a bit of a relief for Venus to get out of Scorpio and to be in Sagittarius. It's about space, it's about room, it's about doing what we please, and from a social point of view, just things should be easier. There's less intensity, and perhaps we can be more spontaneous. So overall, there's quite a lot going on over the course of a week. I think the most important thing is the fact that Mercury and Saturn are going stationary direct, very close to one another. So in some respects, it might be a week of change. Things have been going in a particular direction, and people got used to this direction. Suddenly, then Mercury and Saturn going stationary direct, things almost move in the opposite direction. So if you're thinking that you're involved in a long trend and it's just not moving, well, don't give up, because Mercury and Saturn may indicate that things have just gone too far in one direction, and inevitably they have to go back and move in the other direction. So that might create some balance. And then there is the I Ching. So in terms of the I Ching, don't forget this I Ching reading is absolutely voluntary. If you've been watching this video so far, then you might be thinking, well, you better just see it through to the end. I mean, you don't have to see it through to the end. I flatter myself thinking you might even be inclined to see it through to the end. Why not? Maybe why should you see it through to the end? Some would say that I talk too much. But if you don't want your I Ching read, you really don't have to have it read. You can just stop watching the video now, because what I say just only applies to those who are watching the I Ching section of this video. So do remember that. And when I do the I Ching reading for the week, my reading will have 4 sections. I'll start off with a general view of the hexagram, then I'll look at money, and then career and business, and finally relationships. So I asked the question, What is the week starting on Monday, November the 24th, 2025, going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was revolution. And I think we had revolution quite recently. And of course, it does indicate change. It is a week where you might not be entirely happy with the way things have been developing, and it's all just become a bit boring, and it can't just go on like this forever. And you yourself are changing, and one of the sort of images of this hexagram revolution is molting. I assume that means like shedding. Got this big white dog, which you sometimes hear barking, and big white dog sometimes likes to shed, and it really does, seriously shed. As I found out to my cost, when I went. Well, we didn't. This is a second big white dog that we've had. A Slovensky Čuvač. The first one we got, I think, in 2009. But the thing about this dog is that, I have mild asthma, and I remember when we first got this dog, I just knew, just in the car, just within 5 minutes of the journey, I felt my lungs tightening, and I just knew that I was allergic. And what can you do? I mean, once you bought the dog, you can't really take it back. Well, I suppose you could take it back. You've just got to grin and bear and somehow keep breathing. I think it took about 2 years for my system to get used to the dog. But when we got a second dog, it was no problem. So I kind of got immune to the dog's dander. Yeah, but these dogs do shed a lot, and revolution is about shedding. Every now and then we have to sort of molt, we have to change. Or if you want to think about snakes, every now and then they have to shed their skin, and it's important. It maintains the system's good order. If things just stagnate, they don't shed, and people assume that things are going to stay the same forever, in the end things start to rot and they decay, and in the end they collapse. So the concept of revolution is important, and we may be in a situation where we feel this week that just something has to change. Enough is enough. And it could be very small, something about ourselves in our own routine. Something has to change. If we can do it. I mean, it might be certain relationships have to change, or we might want to just do things differently, or it may be something more substantial. Perhaps we're dealing with power structures that are just not working anymore, and the people in control have to step down, and someone else needs to take their place. This is healthy. Not everyone can be an effective leader. Some people might be effective leaders for a period of time, and then they lose their touch. So, with revolution, we mustn't take things for granted, and we mustn't assume that things have to stay like whatever they're like forever, because change is important. Even revolutionary change is important, because it keeps the system going, and it keeps it dynamic. Now, this hexagram revolution does have one moving line, and that moving line is at the top, and this top line means that we are certainly in the mood for change, and we are able to institute change, and other people might not be convinced, but somehow they go along with it. And this is the question: is that okay? If you've got people around you who are half-hearted, they say, oh yeah, they say that change is necessary. They're prepared to go with it. They're prepared to follow your lead, but they don't necessarily believe in you. And so you have to be quite sort of cynical as far as other people's motivations. Why are people being agreeable? Why are people doing what they're told? Well, it's probably skin deep. They're perhaps thinking about their own interests, who's got the power, and maybe they just want to be polite. So few people have much enthusiasm. But again, maybe that doesn't matter, provided everyone goes through the motions. And I do think that in the end, you really should be able to see it through. And really, it's more important to be strong than to be active, though. Just because you feel yourself to be a revolutionary doesn't mean you have to always have a revolution. And maybe it's just enough to just focus on what you actually believe in, and let the world accept that, let it adjust. And that might take a bit of time, but revolutions don't always have to happen overnight. They can be quite slow. And because the top line moves, that does mean that we move to a second hexagram, and this second hexagram is hexagram number 13, which is fellowship with others. I mean, the Wilhelm translation gives it, I think, as fellowship with men's, but I change men to others. I think one doesn't want to necessarily, give the hexagram title sort of a gendered meaning. I mean, I think men, others, I don't think it really is about gender, but sometimes you have to be literal about it. And if Wilhelm says fellowship with men, sometimes you could argue, well, if that's what he says, that's what he meant. So if that's how it could work out, fellowship with men, but I would be inclined to say it's more sort of fellowship with others, and it's indicating that at some stage you really can be quite sociable, and you can enjoy other people's company, and you don't have to be alone. And it could well be that your ideas about revolution are shared. As soon as you start talking about what you want to change, then you find that you get support, and maybe you really can start the revolution, and whatever that revolution is. And I think that you can certainly find some kindred spirits. So as far as money is concerned, well, when you look at money and you really start to think about money, I mean, assuming money is of some importance to you, I mean, even if you think it's not of importance to you, that doesn't mean you should ignore the subject. But when we're talking about money, it does seem that some changes are required. There may be something about your attitude which isn't perfect. Maybe you've been complacent, you've taken things for granted, you've just assumed that someone can look after your money very well, when in reality that may not be the case. And so in terms of your attitude to money, perhaps your attitude to money needs a bit of a revolution. And you've perhaps been obsessed about money. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. Or maybe you just didn't take money seriously enough. But neither approach is good, because it leads to mistakes. And if you get obsessed about money, then, well, you can never find money. Very often when one gets obsessed about something, one never gets it. And so, try to be sort of more relaxed, if you possibly can. But still, some change is required, and you just can't assume that, for example, your money is necessarily in the right place. But I'm not giving any financial advice here. Just ask questions about your finances, and in that way you can start to sort of understand what is going on. And I think at some level a big change might be required. And we do have the top line moving, and with the top line moving, you certainly have ideas about money, and maybe you're prepared to talk about them. Maybe you're prepared to tell people what to do. And if that were to happen, you'll probably find that people just say fine. They just say fine. If that's what you think, well, let's go with it. It sounds a good idea. I mean, there's not really much conviction here. And it's all down to you. It's all your responsibility. But it's just possible that you may be fooled into thinking that you've got more support than you actually have. And in reality is that certain people are just pretty ambivalent. But does it matter? I mean, at least you're not getting any opposition. And so I think that there is a chance to bring about, some kind of revolution, sort of in a financial sense. And this hexagram, because top line is moving, we switch to a different hexagram number 13, fellowship with others, and it could be that something you do with other people could be profitable. I mean, if we look at it at this hexagram in the most positive way, we don't have to necessarily do things alone, and maybe with other people's help and cooperation, we can put something into action, which in the end it really has a big dividend, can really make money for us. So overall, from a financial perspective, I think that the situation does look quite positive, but you must be ready to embrace change. That hexagram revolution, the first hexagram, is not about just accepting the status quo. Just something does need to be turned upside down. And then we have got career and business. First hexagram is revolution. I don't know how you manage your work and your job and how you get on with your co-workers, but revolution indicates a change is required, that things are not absolutely perfect. And maybe you've just gone along with things, it's been okay, you haven't rocked the boat, so is there any need to complain? Well, yeah, maybe. Revolution could point to complacency on your part. You've just let things carry on in the way they always have done, and revolution is indicating that maybe that's just not good enough, that you have to really up the pace and do things of lasting value. And if you're doing something of lasting value and you're recognized for it at work, then that's good. But maybe the key issue is just being given a chance. If you are going into work, you need to be given a chance to be original. And once you can do that, then the week really starts to pick up. And we do have top line moving, and so with the top line moving, well, I think that you have to be quite independent minded here, and you don't want to be flattered. So if you're going into work, particularly if you have a lot of responsibility, you may find that other people are particularly supporting. They may give you some flattery. They may tell you how wonderful you are. And that's nice, but don't be overwhelmed by it. Things are changing, and perhaps it's your job to bring about change. And if people are nice to you, they might be using that pleasantness to just keep you tied up in moral knots and not do the things that you were planning on doing. But you have to remember that sometimes change is necessary. And because the top line moves, that does mean that we move to a second hexagram, and the second hexagram we get is fellowship with others. So as far as career is concerned, fellowship with others indicates that you really might be on best form when you're working in a team. Just might be necessary when you're working in a team. You just feel protected, and you feel really able to express, who you are and, what you want. And, by and large, people will, listen to you. So I think, that is quite positive, and it does seem that at some level other people's presence, can be quite soothing. So that's something to think about. And of course, soothing, sort of career setting. I know that if you are going into work, you probably sort of have your own sort of ambitions and you want to, move forward with them. But, having other people around you can just make things easier. And if you are applying for jobs, if perhaps you haven't got a job, you're looking for a job, remember with the first hexagram revolution, it's quite possible that something has to change. Perhaps your approach hasn't been quite right, and revolution is asking you to shake things up a bit and to be perhaps be more radical and generally change your approach. And we do have the top line moving, so as I've just said, so there is a certain sort of dynamism here, and maybe with that top line moving, and as I've just said, revolution moving to fellowship with others, that might indicate that you can really benefit from other people's company. And not just benefit, but you can just start to see things in a new way. And some of your ideas can be shaken up, and just on your own it's difficult to create the change. But when you hear what other people have to say, this might have an impact on how you view your career and how you see things. And you might just start to be aware of what other people are thinking, and then you're thinking that maybe they've got a point, and things might in the end look very different. And finally, there is relationships. So as far as relationships are concerned, whatever those relationships might be, things maybe have to be changed somewhat. You shouldn't just go with things in the same old way, making the same assumptions, making the same sacrifices, because it gets a bit boring and it gets a bit stagnant. And so so it may be that certain relationships need to change the way they operate. Now that doesn't mean to say any relationship is going to be destroyed or is going to be undermined. It's just that things have got stuck. And what also might have got stuck is the power dynamic. So in every relationship there is a power dynamic, but that power dynamic can change. And so with revolution, you might feel that the other person is not really asserting themselves as much as they should. They might be weak. Or they might be the opposite. They might be throwing their weight around, and maybe that needs to change. You need to perhaps assert your power and change the power relationship, and that could be very much the right thing to do. And revolution, if you're looking for a relationship, then with revolution, it's kind of saying that if you want change, if you want someone new in your life, you have to do things differently, and not just slightly differently, perhaps very differently, in a way that is almost quite transformative. And so that's revolution. I do think that it is a strong hexagram, and you can be influential, but the question is, what is another person thinking? Or at least it might be the other person thinking, the other person that, well, it might be the case that another person is doing what they're told, seems to be following your lead, but but the question is, what's going on? Perhaps it's half-hearted. Maybe they're following your lead because they have to, because they can't really stand up to you. And so the support you get from another person for your ideas and your originality might be half-hearted. But does that matter? the key point is that you get results. And I don't think you should worry too much about other people's private thoughts. You might think they're not committed enough, but does it matter? Provided the job is done. And we have, because we had the top line moving, we do get a second hexagram, which is hexagram number 13, which is fellowship with others. And from a perspective of relationships, I would see this as being quite good. And I think that by the end of a week, you should find that you really are able to get on with people and benefit from other people, and maybe make commitments to other people. That is perhaps one aspect of what fellowship with others is about. It's not just meeting people for a drink or having casual conversations or whatever. There is a sense of commitment, and if you're looking for commitment, I think that commitment is something that you can find. And so those are my forecasts, if you like, for the week. And the week doesn't look too bad. Certainly from a perspective of the I Ching. I Ching does really indicate that there is going to be progress. Yes, it might, to begin with, need a revolution, but once a revolution is happening, I think that things will happen at a good speed, and we can find the right people to bring into our lives and to make our lives more fulfilling. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy it, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.